Hello, and welcome to another chapter where I walk you through important concepts related to food and nutrition. And this chapter, we're discussing food safety. So let me begin by sharing my screen. And as a reminder, my name is Tony Gist, and I'm the one who works at the university. And I'm going to be sharing with you some helpful tips, tricks, and important information regarding serving it safe. So, as we discuss food safety, we're going to talk about the following learning objectives. First, we need to define foodborne illness and explain its impact. Second, we're going to recognize how people get foodborne illness, and we're going to highlight some common signs and symptoms. Third, we're going to examine the incubation period with common foodborne illnesses. We're going to move forward and then discuss allergies, their significance, and how reactions can be prevented and as well as addressed. And lastly, we're going to help you by showing you steps that you can use to decrease the likelihood of foodborne illness for yourself. And so, defining foodborne illness, it's an illness caused by consuming a foodstuff that contains contaminants that could cause negative health effects. So, we can have contaminants like pathogens, such as bacteria, viruses, parasites, and molds that all can cause a foodborne illness. Additionally, toxins in your foodstuff can cause foodborne illness, and biological things like prions can actually cause issues too. And prion, if you're not familiar with that term, if you think of mad cow disease, that was caused by a prion. And here in the United States, this is very impactful in a negative way. And there are some major causes of foodborne illness here in the United States. So, just to put it in perspective, 48 million cases of foodborne illness are here in the United States annually. That's 1 in 6 Americans each year that has foodborne illness. We have 128,000 hospitalizations every year, according to the FDA, and 3,000 deaths here in the United States alone from foodborne illness. And the top causes are E. coli, norovirus, salmonella, campylobacter, and hepatitis A. If we look at this globally, we have a lot of impact globally as well. So we have 600 million cases of foodborne illness annually in the globe. That's 1 in 10 people here in the globe that have a noted foodborne illness. This is 420,000 deaths annually in the world, as well as the top causes varying from region to region, depending upon what it is that that region struggles with, whether it be water safety, whether it be proper food handling, or whether it be the ability to cook your food in a way that is safe. So things like contaminated water, improper food handling, and even toxins in the food supply can be concerns depending upon where it is you are on the globe itself. And this impacts the gross domestic product, or more or less work productivity, when we're talking about just living, existing, having a functional world. It is $110 billion that's lost each year in productivity and medical expenses when we have low or middle income countries. And obviously, that number becomes even greater when we're talking about all countries in the whole entire world itself. And if you're wondering what this looks like, what does a foodborne illness look like with regard to how you get it, how long it takes between the time you're exposed to it and the time you start having signs or symptoms, and what some of those signs and symptoms are. So when we look at this, we want to notice that here with this chart, we have many different organisms that can cause illness. We've got Bacillus cereus, we have botulism, we have E. coli, and hepatitis. Each one of these types of illnesses is going to be something that can really debilitate an individual. And one thing that I want you to pick up from this chart is some people often think they consume something and then within 5 minutes they're super sick. And I'm like, no, that's not how that works. Actually, what happens oftentimes is it could be, the next day that you get sick, or even 3 days later that you get ill, or sometimes even 2 weeks later. So look at the varying information when it comes to the onset after ingestion. That's what we call the incubation period. You've ingested it, it incubates, and then you start seeing some major signs and symptoms. So hepatitis, we've got 28 days on average before you start seeing major signs and symptoms. And those signs and symptoms can be very different. Some have abdominal cramps, others diarrhea alone. With other individuals, it can be dark urine and jaundice or flu-like symptoms. So we do want to make sure that you understand what things can make you ill and how long that incubation period is, as well as signs and symptoms. So be able to look up information from the Food and Drug Administration or other reputable sources. Because when we look at these incubation periods, like I said, some of these are very short, others are very long. So highlight some unique signs and symptoms when we're looking at things like listeria, norovirus, salmonella, staphylococcus, other sorts of things. Just be able to recognize them or have this page as a reference so that you know in the future where to turn to for information. When we're talking about food safety, allergies become an increasing concern. And what an allergy is the food itself isn't the problem, but it becomes your body's reaction to the food that becomes the issue. Your immune system sees whatever it is you're consuming as non-self and something that you should be protected against. We can have some signs and symptoms that range from a mildly unpleasant sensation to a life-threatening situation. So some signs and symptoms of a food allergy include tingling or itching in the mouth after you've been exposed to a foodstuff, hives, which are going to be these kind of like, it almost looks like blotchy red raised skin, and that can be with or without itching. We can have swelling where the allergen came in contact with the individual, so like the lips, the cheek, the hands, whatever it is that came in contact. If it becomes very concerning, we can have trouble breathing where the airway starts becoming swollen. We can have gastrointestinal responses in the stomach, such as pain in that stomach that an individual reports. We can have diarrhea, which surfaces, or even vomiting. We can have a decrease in blood pressure associated with this because we have fluid that's going to the surface of our skin and is leaving the bloodstream. Therefore, the blood pressure can go down and you can get lightheadedness or even fainting, which occurs. These are the hives, the trouble breathing, the decrease in blood pressure are all often signs and symptoms associated with an anaphylactic response or anaphylaxis associated with a food allergy. And if it's not treated quickly enough, we can actually have death, which occurs. So we want to understand that this is not something that someone's just making an excuse not to consume a particular food or they're being overly sensitive. This can definitely be a life-threatening situation if we're not being respectful of these food allergies for individuals who have them. And so we have major food allergies that have been noted, and those major food allergies have now gone from 8 major food allergies that have been noted or food categories to 9. And the first one is milk. Then we have eggs, fish, crustacean shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, and peanuts are actually a legume, even though they have the word nut in them, wheat, soybeans, and just recently, sesame has been added to that list as well. If you're someone who has food allergies, what we want you to encourage to do is we want you to read the label itself. And there's a video here at that is associated with the FDA. It says, have food allergies, read the label. And watch this video because the video itself is definitely going to walk you through how you can most effectively read the label. And I'm going to showcase a little bit of it in the next few slides. So when we look at the allergens noted on a food label, we have laws that require the declaration of the presence of common food allergens. And there are 2 ways to declare a major food allergen. The first one is in the ingredient list. Obviously, if you have an ingredient that says egg in the ingredient list, you know that egg is in there. But there can also be a separate contains statement that says it contains eggs, which is fantastic, and it highlights it even a second time. However, if someone has a very severe food allergy, right now, The possible presence due to cross contact is not necessarily addressed on the label, or it's not required to be addressed on every single label if they have standard operating procedures that would keep these items separate from each other. Things can happen in processing though, so best that you go to brands, labels, and companies that you trust if you do have a severe food allergy. If someone is exposed to an allergen and they start having a reaction, what should be done? Well, if there are mild signs and symptoms like a runny nose, a little bit of like blotchiness in the neck, but nothing major, not hives, you can start by taking an antihistamine. So there are antihistamines that are over the counter. They look like those little pink pills. Most households have some of them. And so take it as directed. I would also encourage you to call your doctor just to confirm that no more treatment needs to be done. If there are severe signs or symptoms like swelling of the mouth, trouble breathing, if there's an epinephrine pen or an EpiPen, administer that immediately, call 911 immediately, because these are signs and symptoms that might be very, very time dependent, because if that airway closes up, it becomes a severe concern with regard to someone, again, having that airway completely close off and the individual not being able to get oxygen. So act quickly. According to the Mayo Clinic, you should see your healthcare provider or allergist if you have a food allergy symptom shortly after eating something. If possible, see your provider when the allergic reaction is occurring, and this will help your provider make a diagnosis. So if you eat something and you have a reaction, immediately go to convenient care. Even if it's not something that may cause anaphylaxis immediately, you don't know how your body's going to progress with this necessarily. So if you have good insurance, if you feel comfortable, go to convenient care. At a minimum, call your doctor. But again, get that antihistamine in you if you start seeing some swelling. Seek emergency treatment when we have anaphylaxis symptoms such as the constriction of airways that makes it difficult to breathe, shock with a severe drop in blood pressure, a rapid pulse, meaning your body's trying to, compensate for something major, or even dizziness or lightheadedness. So these are all things we want to make sure the person is taken care of as quickly as possible. For you, regardless of whether you have allergies or not, but as you prepare food, as you purchase food, as you store food, we want to make sure that we prevent foodborne illness, and we do everything we can do possible. And there are 4 steps to this: clean, separate, cook, and chill. So what we mean by cleaning is we've got these steps to help prevent foodborne illness. First thing is wash your hands, wash them properly. So sing happy birthday twice. Happy birthday to you under warm running water. When you first get the soap on, lather, lather, lather between the fingers, scrub the nails if you have a scrub brush, on the back of the hands, up the wrist, and again, rinse properly. If you don't know how to wash hands properly, there's so many videos out there. Highly encourage you to check some of them out. Also, if you're using utensils, wash and sanitize them as well as surfaces. We also want to make sure that if you're using towels to clean surfaces or to dry utensils, that we use paper towels, or we want to make sure if we're using cloth towels that they have been sanitized recently, either with a really hot soapy wash and or again, a really hot dryer, so that they definitely are killing those bacteria. We want to rinse any plant produce. So if you buy something like a cantaloupe, which we'll be discussing later, make sure you rinse it really well, and you can rinse it in some pretty warm water to minimize the chances of foodborne illness. And if you have cans that you're going to be opening, rinse the can lid before opening it. Another thing that we want to do is we want to separate. So when we're separating raw meats from other foods, we want to make sure that not just raw meats, but anything that needs to be cooked is separated from foods that are what we call ready to eat. You can have different cutting boards. So things that are going to be like, stop, make sure you cook it, can be on a red cutting board. Things that are like, go, green, something like a vegetable that you can eat raw, have a green cutting board, and never use the different color cutting boards with, the food that needs to be cooked should be on the red cutting board. The food that you can eat raw can be on the green cutting board, and that's going to help you keep track of everything. Do not reuse plates without cleaning or sanitizing them. I've seen people where they come to the grill and they've got a plate. with the raw hamburgers on it. And they put the raw hamburgers on the grill and then they cook them. And then they put the cooked hamburgers back on that plate, and the cooked hamburgers sop up the juice, the drippings from the raw hamburgers, and you've actually cross-contaminated in that way. Not a good thing. And we also don't want to reuse marinades. So if you have a chicken that you've been marinating in a delicious brine, and then you take the chicken out and you cook it, we don't want to then 3 days later use that same marinade for another chicken. As we move forward, we want to make sure we cook properly. The thermometer is the only indicator if cooked eggs, meats, or other animal products are safe to eat. I don't even know how many thermometers we have in our house. We have 3 for our smoker. We have 2 for our fryer. We have individual thermometers for the different foodstuffs, because this is the only way possible to tell what's going on. Our liquid egg yolks, even if you like your eggs runny, I do want to let you know, if you're someone who has a compromised immune system, those are dangerous to consume. We want to make sure we either have pasteurized egg product that has been brought through that pasteurization process safely, and then we can use kind of a runny egg, or we want to make sure we cook it all the way through, or just understand the risk that you might be taking. If we're cooking items, we want to stir them constantly in the microwave. We want to stir when we're cooking them in the crock pot, and rotate them when cooking so we don't get any cold spots that aren't getting up to the proper temperature. And we want to bring animal-based soups, stews, and gravies to a boil or a boiling temperature if we're reheating them and consuming them later. We also want to chill properly. We want to check the refrigerator and the freezer to make sure that they're at the right temperature. So put a thermometer in each one of those if you don't have one already. And if you've cooked foods and you have them out on a potluck, or you're hosting Thanksgiving, you want to refrigerate very quickly. We don't want to leave them out for people to graze on for 2, 3, 4 hours. The faster you can refrigerate it, the safer it's going to be. And we want to, again, like we said with the cooking, stir and rotate when we're cooking. And if we're chilling, we can even kind of stir things when we're chilling it as well. And we want to thaw items safely. If we're thawing in the refrigerator, we want to use cold refrigerator, and we want to make sure that it's going to be slowly thawing out in that safe environment. If we're putting it under cold water, we want to make sure that water is cold, and we have that food stuff probably in a plastic bag. And then we're going to be kind of moving it around a little bit. And once it's thawed under that cold water, we do want to cook that immediately. If we thaw in the microwave with the defrost button, we still need to cook that immediately as well. So if we thaw something in the refrigerator, no need to cook it immediately. You can leave it in the refrigerator for a couple of days. Cold water or microwave thawing, cook immediately for the safest food product. We also want to make sure we're not marinating things on the counter. Marinate it in the fridge. So if we have a raw meat, you need to still observe food safety. You can't just marinate it on the counter just because it's in a brine. And we want to divide foodstuffs, cool them quickly. And so these are things that we want to make sure that we keep in mind. If we want to learn about a case study on cantaloupes, just recently in 2023, there's been a cantaloupe recall, and there were some major cantaloupe safety issues that surfaced in about 2011. So you can read about that in the book, and you can also research the information using the QR code on this slide. So the questions become, what characteristics of cantaloupe make it particularly vulnerable to bacteria? Well, you'll see up here, they've got this nice latticey rind where bacteria can really kind of dive in and just hold onto that rind pretty quickly. So we need to keep in mind that that skin is something that is bumpy, lumpy in spaces where bacteria can kind of cling on to. Then we also cut the cantaloupe. And if we haven't properly rinsed it with really hot water on the outside and we just cut, we're actually introducing that bacteria into the raw pulpy cantaloupe part that you're actually going to be consuming. And therefore the bacteria can grow pretty quickly in there. So we've got some risk factors during growing and packing that were addressed by a group of individuals who discussed it after this 2011 outbreak. And so the things that they discussed were the importance of water quality, making sure that we don't have an excessive amount of bacteria in that water that we're using to water the cantaloupes with. We also want to make sure that the equipment is made in a manner that's going to decrease or reduce the likelihood of having issues with that bacteria from the outside of the cantaloupe getting into that pulpy part and then causing consumers to get ill, as well as packing. So once the fruit gets into a consumer's kitchen, you can additionally rinse it with really, really hot water, and you can observe food safety. If you cut the melon, you need to put in the refrigerator right away. And if it starts looking like a little bit bad in that refrigerator, get rid of that melon. If we want to take this a step further, we want to review an article and we want to reflect. For example, can foodborne illness be caught from person to person? When should someone see a doctor? How are foodborne illness symptoms treated? And if you get sick, should you report your incident and why? So the answers to this are yes, foodborne illness can be contagious. Scary, but true. Hepatitis A, Shigella, norovirus, Salmonella, E. coli, all of these can be passed from a person to a person through food as a vector or other means. When should someone see a doctor? Well, if you've been vomiting for 2 or more days, go see a doctor. If you have diarrhea for several days, or if at any point that diarrhea becomes bloody or black, go see a doctor. If you have really lightheadedness to the point where you have fainted or you feel like you're going to, go see a doctor. And if your fever is over 101 degrees, go see a doctor. So if you're wondering how they're going to tell you to treat your foodborne illness, one is don't take antidiarrheals or anti-vomiting. Your body's trying to get the stuff out of your system by vomiting and having diarrhea. If you take something that's going to stop it, what's going to happen is that bacteria can actually multiply inside your body and get you even sicker. Don't do that. If they realize that it is bacterial in nature and it is something that could be treated with antibiotics, they could prescribe antibiotics. They also want to make sure that you get the proper hydration. So they might put an IV in you, make sure that you are hydrated properly. And if you get sick, you should report this incident to the local health department, such as the county health department. And then they can see if an outbreak is happening and they can actually help protect other individuals. So as you go through this difficult information, if you've got questions, stop by and ask me, email me, reach out. Just know that I'm here for you. It can be a very complex topic, and I'd love to help clarify any myths or misconceptions you might have with regard to food safety.